Thank you for joining us for a special edition of the Sports Branding Podcast, the Design Legends Series. The Design Legends Series on the Sports Branding Podcast introduces talented creatives behind the outstanding work of that era, which is arguably more popular now than it was 30 years ago. It's a small but extremely talented group who collaborated with the creative decision makers inside the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, and MLB. Together, they created some of the most popular team, league, and special event identities in professional sports. The series celebrates these creative achievements while acknowledging and saluting those designers who've changed how we view sports forever. For this episode, we're honored to welcome Tom Nikosey, a legendary designer, illustrator, and lettering artist whose career has spanned more than 5 decades across music, film, sports, and entertainment. During the golden era of sports branding, NBA creative director Tom O'Grady specifically sought out Nikosey to help create a new identity for the Seattle SuperSonics. The result was one of the most memorable logos in NBA history, a bold, dimensional masterpiece that became synonymous with the team throughout the mid-1990s. In this episode, Tom Nikosey and Tom O'Grady reunite to revisit their creative partnership and explore the remarkable career of a true design legend. If you enjoy interesting conversations about sports branding, you're in the right place. Please like, subscribe, and comment at the Sports Branding Podcast YouTube channel. And subscribe to the Sports Branding Substack, the authentic voice of the industry. I'm Bridget Smith, Creative Director at Game Plan Creative. Joining me is Tom O'Grady, founder of Game Plan Creative and co-host for the Sports Branding Podcast.
Thanks, Bridget, and thanks everyone for joining us. We are super excited to speak with Tom. But before we do, there was a time not too long ago when sports branding wasn't about brand strategy and merchandise sales. It was part of the game. And the game itself was everything. Beginning in the 1980s and accelerating rapidly through the early 2000s, there was a radical and transformational change how sports teams and leagues approach their brand design and creative. During this period, the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NHL all added in-house creative services divisions who managed both league and individual team logo and uniform branding, as well as event branding, such as All-Star Games, league playoffs, and even the Super Bowl. Their creative efforts transformed how games appear on the field, on broadcast, and even in pop culture. Today, sports teams' logos, uniforms, and merchandise are critically important to fans' allegiance to their teams. What has been largely overlooked during this creative renaissance is the outstanding body of work produced by designers, especially during the 1990s. Truly the golden era of team and league branding. Welcome to our Sports Branding Podcast here. It's, kind of the goal is to talk to the people who created some of the most visible brands in the world, and you are obviously one of those people. So to connect after 30 years is really kind of cool, and to meet you over a Zoom call is also excellent because, back in the day it would be a phone call, some faxes back and forth, right, to kind of set the mood in its own. I've always been an enormous fan, and to chance to talk to you is just kind of like a pinch me moment. So I thank you for taking your time, and really looking forward to this. About you, so you were born and raised in Brooklyn,
right?
And attended Pratt Institute. So
I was telling Bridget earlier, I went to grammar school, high school, and college, all in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn and Prospect Park. We moved to Bay Ridge around the age of 10. I watched the Verrazano Bridge being built from my bedroom window. I got involved in music when I was in high school, and I was in a band, and we started making records when I was still a senior. So I was kind of torn between my art and my music. And I went to a Catholic high school, so art was just an elective at best. But I was really into the art. I was in an academic high school, and the art teacher said, you really ought to go to art school. My parents were like, really? Art school? How are you going to make a living? Anyway, long story short, I applied to Pratt. I got in. I started taking graphic design courses and illustration courses. And you know how that goes. It just opens up your whole world. The lettering thing, where the lettering thing came in, was I wasn't really good at drawing people's likenesses. I wasn't a figurative illustrator. I was more of a graphic illustrator. And I had a pretty good handwriting because both parents had pretty good handwritings. And that gave me more incentive to keep going with lettering. I always got A's in penmanship, but I got like C's in science and math. So you go with what you do. And growing up in Brooklyn, I was involved in all kinds of sports. You know, I was a pitcher in baseball, a quarterback in football. I was a shooting guard in basketball. I even played street hockey. So it was the hand to eye coordination thing. And putting those two things together, the eye to hand, learning how to draw, and really working at drawing, it all started to come together when I was in art school, because the teachers picked up on my lettering in the hand lettering classes. And as designers, hand lettering is one of the hardest subjects to do in college or in art school. And I would draw the typography and do hand lettering. And then that gave me the incentive and the impetus to keep going towards lettering. Well, the music thing was still on my shoulders going through art school, and we were playing shows and making records. And so when I graduated, Pratt had a degree in communication design with a minor in illustration. I told my parents, I'm going to California. And they said, California? What's in California? I said, the recording industry. I had a contract in New York, but it was with Capitol in California with the first band. The second band I was in, I said, let's go to California and see if we can get another contract. We go out to California, we start playing in clubs. We couldn't really make it. And so the band broke up. I stayed, the other two guys left. I sent home for my school portfolio because I wanted to stay in California, and I had to get a job. And I thought, God, I want to do album covers. So there's the album cover thing. Having the music and rock and roll in my DNA and sports and all that stuff, I wanted to be a graphic designer specializing in logos, starting out in the music industry, which was a big thing to try to accomplish. And I was lucky enough to hook up with a couple of design studios that were doing album covers. They tried me on doing lettering. I succeeded. It's just basic hand lettering things that went along with photographs on an album. This is way before I started doing the central pieces, logo designs. And that's how it started.
You made this quick transition or not transition, just expanded your range of talents to go into the sports category, and getting 4 Super Bowl logos today would be like, they would embroider your face on the center, at the 50-yard line. That's such a big deal.
This is the official ticket from the game that the art director at the NFL gave me as a gift. And it's in lucite, and I have it in my showcase. Isn't that cool? It's actually probably my favorite of all 4 of them. I mean, I worked on like 7 or 8 Super Bowl logos. These are the 4 that were chosen.
Yeah. And even Bridget and I were talking about that this era around that 20, like the logos took over. And then a little bit later, also some of those characters of the city came in, like the Rose Bowl for Pasadena or the Jacksonville Bridge. Almost like they became almost like little travel picture logos,
It wasn't allowed when I started the Super Bowl 17 was my first one. And it was really the first time that the NFL allowed any kind of a design that had some subtle reference in it, other than red, white, and blue and the word Super Bowl and the Roman numerals. They have very strict guidelines. And, you stay within the guidelines. It was at the Rose Bowl. And I know the Rose Bowl intimately. It's right here in Pasadena. And it's this gorgeous Art Deco structure that's been there since, whatever the date was. And I thought, well, I have to have a hint of Art Deco in there somehow. And I tried to get that V in the center, and I got it in the center. And this was one of about 5 sketches, and they went with this one. And I went to the game. It was unbelievable. But that was my first one. It wasn't until Super Bowl 25 they introduced silver because it was silver anniversary. Prior to that was white, and blue, and that was it. You couldn't do anything else. And then Super Bowl 25, they introduced the silver. And I thought, well, and now they're finally loosening up. 26, they started adding the graphics that you referred to. And I think 26 was again at the Rose Bowl. Maybe, no, 27 was at the Rose Bowl because I worked on that when I introduced graphic roses and all kinds of stuff. But these first ones really, I think, started to set the trend because I was explaining to the creative director at the NFL, I said, you know, I'm going to do them symmetrical so you can merchandise them back and front and back. It expands the possibilities of merchandising products. And I knew they're making big money on that stuff. And they agreed. And Super Bowl 20 was slam dunk. You know, the double X was just, I couldn't wait. I had this in my head when he called. Even before I sketched it out, I said, I got to do this. Anyway, these things were the setup to merchandising logos, pins and embroidery. And, you know, here's another one.
Oh, yes. Gorgeous.
This is
So
25.
beautiful.
Yeah. And this is a silver coin.
Oh,
This is what they get. It's really, really beautiful. And you can see the 25 logo. It's also silver printed on this, like a satin material, you know, red, blue, and silver. They went all out of 25. It was just crazy. But
and that year would have been around 1990.
that was 91. That was the Giants. When that game was New York.
Broncos.
Yeah. It was in Florida, though.
Okay.
It was at the Superdome. Is that
because that era, right around that silver, is really when the 90s started for obviously the NBA. And that's when we just metallic threads. Let's use metallic for the Sonics. Let's make the Raptors teeth silver. Metallic threads became so popular in that 90s decade. And largely a lot of it, and this logo really points it out, it has such a premium quality to it. Red and blue leave it kind of like, okay, you're doing the colors of the logo. And we did that with the NBA up until like 1992 when I joined the league. And I said, why are we not using the colors of the team that's hosting the All-Star game instead of just red and blue? And actually 1991, and in 1991 or 92, Orlando was a 5-color logo. So we had the magic black, the royal blue, the silver. We had a touch of orange in there. And from then on, all of the All-Star game logos were the color of the host city because why not? It made all the sense in the world. But, to break the chains of these like style guides are just locked into this red and blue, and the lack of, which makes your designs that much more impressive because you have just 2 colors to work with. But then boom, this is a beautiful logo. I love them all. So it's pretty amazing to have that great run. And so obviously when I'm trying to work with somebody on a team logo, knowing somebody has done 4 Super Bowl logos gives me a little bit of confidence that you'll be able to handle it. It must have been kind of a dream for you to be a musician at heart and then to be doing the Grammy Award designs.
Yeah, the Grammys was fun. It was, I actually did 3 Grammy logos, and getting to go to the Grammys was even more fun. It's like going to the Academy Awards. It's like once in a lifetime opportunity. Went 3 times, my wife and I, and she was in the music business. That's how I met her.
Real quickly, because we kind of did this before we started, to get the chance to work on album cover design must have been a really big deal in your career because, like I said, that was the upper end of the scale of if a talented graphic designer or illustrator, an album cover for a band is. You mentioned Saturday Night Fever.
The album cover, yeah. That's how old I am. I'm one of many designer illustrators or designers who was lucky enough to be able to be associated with a lot of things. I mean, I've done hundreds and hundreds of jobs in my career, and you guys are probably only aware of just maybe the cream of those or the lucky ones that made it through. But you know, both as designers, when you're working with a client, you have to present several sketches. And a lot of those sketches are viable ideas that you thought, well, wait a minute, why did they choose C instead of A, or, no 14 rather than number 6? You just don't know. It's a combination of what the client's tastes are with the marketing. Now it's all marketing. And now it's all marketing, merchandising, and the internet, blogs and whatever. What's going to work best in all those cases? And everything is governed by those factors and restrictions. You're up to the mercy of whoever is kind of paying the bills, unfortunately. But you put your best foot forward. And I always try to pre-guess, okay, which one are they going to pick? And sometimes my wife will say, I love this one. Or my son will say, or friends that might see as you're sketching on stuff, I love that one. Whatever happened to that one? I said, well, it's in the graveyard. It's in the back pages.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
When I've noticed for designers like us, maybe even like the past 10 years, the flexibility to take an icon and put it on all these different pieces before you even present it to a client makes it easier to have the confidence to go in there and say, okay, instead of having 7 that we're going to present, let's cut it down to 3 and let's have a strong viewpoint and let's show the extension of that mark. And we weren't doing that in the mid 90s. We weren't really going into this, oh, and here it is on the, the courtside signage, and here it is here, and here it is there. We were kind of like walking in with 5 logos, and, like you had to have so much trust from the client and from the team to be able to go in there and like fight for your ideas. And I think there's a little bit less of that now because you can kind of like strategize on what, it's like they used to say Wayne Gretzky was a great hockey player because he saw the pass three places ahead. He didn't pass to the player. He was passing to an open piece of ice where the player would go, and that's kind of like what the technology is sped up for a little bit.
Case in point, AI, everybody's all upset about AI. And, I'm waiting to see what's going to happen with trademarks and copyrights with respect to AI. But in the positive use of AI for designers, right to what you were just saying, back in the day, we didn't have the budget, nor did we have the time to embroider a logo that we thought would be good and bring in a sample of the embroidery to say, this is what it's going to look like on all your hats. You can do that now with AI. You take your logo, you say, I want an embroidered hat, give me in this color and that color, and it looks like the real thing. It's just quite amazing. It's a similar analogy to when we were able to use the computer and pop in colors. Prior to that, we had it, did it, ink it, and then the computer came out and I was like, oh, fantastic. People always ask me, well, oh my God, how did you do that? And how long did it take you? I said, somebody asked me once when I was lecturing, how long did it take you to do that Super Bowl 25? I said, well, let me see. I was probably about 48 at the time. I said, 48 years. And they go, what? And I said, that's how long it took me to get to the point to be able to sit down and figure it out. All the experience.
No, but you're absolutely right. It's all those years of trial and error and things that worked and didn't work. How about the baseball side? You did the Padres and you did the Giants.
The Padres thing, just real quick, the Padres, the upper management from I think they did the Orioles, Camden Yards.
Yes.
They came to San Diego to do the Padres because the Padres needed an upgrade. They needed all kinds of stuff, and they were trying to get a ballpark in San Diego. They were still playing at Jack Murphy,
yeah,
Jack Murphy Stadium. And my brother-in-law is a lawyer and a huge Padre fan. They call him Mr. Padre. He's from San Diego. He knew the guys in the upper management, and they were in the owner's box watching a game, and they were all talking about, we got these ideas. We got to upgrade the uniforms. We got to change the logos and blah, blah, blah. And my brother-in-law, Jay, he said, well, my brother-in-law is a designer. And they thought, uh-oh, here we go. So they said out of respect, we'll have him send samples down and we'll let you know. So Jay called me, he was all excited, and he says, contact Mike D. He was a chief operating officer at the time. Larry Lucchino was the CEO.
Sure.
And so we put together, Larry.
Yep.
So he put a bunch of samples and I sent it down, and I had already done the Sonics, right? Because the Sonics, what we do, 94, 95?
Yeah, we did it in 95 and it launched in 90. We did in late 94, I think, and it launched in 95, 96.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we always need like about a year to get it through all of its gyrations. Yeah.
So I had the Sonics in my samples. I had the Giants San Francisco logo because I did that in 91. And I'm not sure what other sports things I had. Because you know how literal.
Oh, yeah. Super Bowl logo, I'm sure.
Mike D, the chief operating officer, he saw the Sonics logo and the lights went off in his head because he was a basketball fan. And he calls me and he said, listen, can you come down and talk to us? I said, yeah, when do you want me there? He says, how about tomorrow? I was like, 200 miles. Anyway, it was like the opportunity when you called me, Tom. It was the same kind of thing. So I went down there, had all my portfolio, had all the stuff. And they said, and he showed it to Larry. Larry came in and says, well, your stuff is impressive. Do you think you could handle a Major League Baseball team? And I said, well, I don't know until I try.
By the mid-1990s, the NBA was in the middle of a full-scale visual brand awakening. And did they ever lean into it? The league's look, once rooted in restraint and tradition, was suddenly louder, more colorful, and more in your face. The NBA and the 3 other major U.S. sports leagues are in the middle of an explosive growth period. 24 new expansion teams are added from 1988 to 2003. That's 24 teams in 15 years. Both new as well as existing teams are moving towards bolder, more complex logo designs and colors, with more expressive typography. And more elaborate uniform designs are everywhere. A radical sports branding visual transformation is fully underway. The Seattle SuperSonics are long overdue for a brand overhaul, as they haven't had an updated logo in 20 seasons.
It was so great, first of all, to work with you on the Sonics, because I was working with a pros, so I didn't have to worry about any issues beyond just trying to push or work through these, committees or whatnot. But we had the Raptors going, we had the Grizzlies going, like the WNBA was coming. So we had all of these branding projects going simultaneously. I think the Sonics is like a perfect place to kind of say, it was almost like right in the middle of the 90s. It's a perfect, I think, logo to show transitions. You have, from the piece that you gave me, Client Directive, embrace the 60s jet era style inspired by Boeing's aircraft presence in Seattle. I don't remember ever sending that to you, but I'm sure I did, because we needed to give you some kind of creative target to start the project, which was really important for us,
No, very much so. I remember having a conversation with you in the very beginning because, like I said about the Super Bowl logos, I wanted to make it have reference to the city in some point. Because I realized, even though I started with Super Bowl 17 back in the early 80s, getting that accomplished with the Art Deco touch, and it seemed to work on all the other Super Bowl. They wound up doing it later on, very literally. Was hoping to try to do something similar in the redesign of the Sonics. And I remember asking you, I said, well, the Sonics have SuperSonics comes from, the whole influence of the jet thing up there, Boeing. And then you said, yeah, well, let's start there. Let's do that. So that's the early sketches were all about that feel. I tried to tap into using the word SuperSonics because that was the first directive before it was shortened. I tried to tap into not literally the feeling of what might have been done back in the 60s, because I wanted legibility and I wanted balance. And I also was thinking merchandise. If they stayed with this direction, any one of these could have worked if they kept that, in my mind. And that's what my guidance was. And I just freehand drew all this stuff. I mean, I did a lot of real rough sketches before I showed you comprehensive things, because I didn't want to waste your time. But later on in the process, when it evolved into, no, let's just do Sonics, let's do more superhero, then I got real rough because my relationship with you at that point, even though it was only over a couple of months period of time, whatever it was, I knew you were pinpointing and understanding where I was going with these things. And I was able to go a little looser and get them to you quicker. So by stage 4, I think it was, there's a lot of real rough things that all have the energy. I wanted energy in this piece. By this time in the late 90s, I had already started doing movie logos, right? Because music industry had gone through a lot of really down parts. And if it wasn't for Michael Jackson saving the music industry with Thriller, who knows what would have happened to the music industry because of piracy and all that stuff. And I said, and 90% of my work was logos for albums and all this kind of stuff in the record industry. And I said, I got to change my direction. I got to start not being, have all my eggs in one basket. And I started doing movie logos, and there's agencies out here that just specialize in movie graphics. And they are crazy. They call, back in the day, they were calling 5 or 6 lettering artists around town in LA and New York. And, they get these hefty budgets from the producers and directors to come up with movie logos, 6 months before the movie was finished. And you'd have to draw like crazy. I mean, they wanted 25 designs in 1 day or 2 days. And if you wanted the job, that's how you cut your teeth, and that's how you get your experience. Well, I got so much experience doing that I look back on it and I think, thank God I had that as my directive to really put my head down and go for it. I learned so much so that by the time I got to the Sonics, I had so much information in my head about thinking on my feet that if I had a thought, boom, I'd sketch it out. And before you know it, I had 20 sketches on my table inside of 2 hours, rough sketches. And then I'd look at them and I'd reduce them down in the copier. Remember we used to use copiers? I'd put that in the copier as small as I can go to about maybe this big, postage size. And the ones that still looked like something, that had the energy in it, I checked and I went back to my sketch and I developed that one because I knew that, yeah, it kind of looks cool at this size. And of course, if you go bigger, it's going to be great. But is it going to work smaller? That's a big key. And that's what I use for the rest of my career. If it works on a postage stamp, then it's going to work on everything.
Everything else. Yeah. And we had the same philosophy about color. Like I always said, if it's going to work in black and white, we're in the end zone, if it works this small in black and white, we'll noodle out, we'll figure out the colors. No problem, but that's why I always wanted to look at black and white sketches for myself too, because I'm like, that's the sanity check, because color is going to be easy. If it's a good logo, no problem. We'll make this real, we'll glam it up as much as we can, but as long as the essence of the idea is there, we're off to the races, So we went through this first phase. And then when we got through that first phase, I loved everything I saw and I knew that we were on the right path. But then we had this conversation internally at the NBA about the length of the word SuperSonics. And so I was like, okay, and I don't even remember if I brought you into the conversation other than, I think we won the Sonics battle. We don't have to do SuperSonics. And, they were giving me a hard time. Why are you shortening this? I said, well, the Knickerbockers are the Knicks. The Trailblazers are the Blazers. The Cavaliers are the Cavs. And they have it even on their jersey. It's not like it's just a nickname. It's part of their brand identity. How do we maybe keep something super about the SuperSonics without saying super, and maybe that was me just, like, I don't even know how that even came about because it's so long ago, but, right in that era too, like we jumped on Jurassic Park's Raptors and, Superman was just seeing its day again. DC and Marvel comics were exploding with all these movies and everything almost had this kind of movie feel to it. So I remember even saying, well, maybe there's something we could do with the word super, except it's not super. It would be the Sonics lettering. I think Tom's going to remember this too, but I remember George Reeves as Superman on the black and white. You remember that. But I remember this Oh, and I remember like, well, maybe there's something even in there. I don't think I sent this to you. I think this was just a conversation.
All we had to do is refer it. All you said just to me was, let's change the direction and let's think in the superhero
Yes.
genre. I said,
Yeah.
bingo. That's all
Yeah.
I needed to hear.
Yeah. And I knew that we already had kind of started having some of the brand DNA from those last two concepts in the 5 and 6 of the black and white page that we just showed. So when we kind of moved to that, then you went and created these really beautiful 3-dimensional versions of the lettering. That one was like, okay, we're there. It's not a matter of if now, it's just a question of which ones. We had, this was just a cornucopia of great solutions that I recall clearly. But I was just like, okay, this moves, this has depth to it. It's this 3-dimensional thing that everybody's doing right now in the mid 90s. It's this really big, bold, loud, in your face, as we called it, graphic design work. And it kind of like was cool because the Sonics had such a quiet identity before this, and to then just come out here and rip it, like you did, was really very cool. And then I know that we had this orbiting ball from the previous versions. And I'm like, boy, maybe that's the other part that we can mix in here because the lettering was hitting it, hard. So
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I was so into doing this project that I kept wanting to make sure I got everything out of my head, that you saw everything. And ultimately, you wind up going back to the one that you initially felt. And that's how this finalized. And then naturally, you had to get the approval. But
what ended up happening there's the final. I don't remember even the next stage beyond this, but also what was happening at the time. And like everything was moving so fast in sports marketing and rebranding. Ovals were huge. Ovals were like huge around, around 94, 95, 96. All of a sudden, an oval was coming really big. Some of the things were happening about maybe we can use an oval to ground this. So it didn't have this punch through it. And then, the Seattle got diminished, which was fine because this was not an expansion team. This was a team that had been around forever. So you didn't really need to do too much with it. But this became the perfect solution for where we ended up. Obviously, it hit all the bases. And then, like when we were so confident in what we were doing, Tom, too, that like I'm even like when we went to even like the gradient and the orbit and the spin, like in 1989, we wouldn't have done that because we wouldn't have had the confidence production wise that we could have pulled it off. But now everything was sublimation and, everything was happening in Illustrator and Photoshop. So I was even like, maybe we could even could we look at even maybe a little bit more movement where the color changes and it's almost like getting hotter as it comes around or moving at you. And then the ball was kind of just a nice way to kind of like bring basketball back into it, as a little like
dotting the I and a little bit.
Yeah, dotting the I a little bit. And so I thought we were in the end zone, it was something that I didn't think that, I had basically an approval from the team and then it was just a matter of kind of selecting colors. And as I recall, when we went into a color palette thing, they did still want the green and they still did want the yellow, but it was like, okay, can we add another color? So I went on a site survey to Seattle and it was like in the fall and it was starting to get the rainy season already. It was absolutely beautiful. I'd never been out to the Pacific Northwest before. And I saw all these lush cypress trees with these beautiful colors and these Japanese maples, and the ground had this like brownish dirt color to it. And like those colors just, you could have the same colors, I guess, in New Hampshire as you did in Seattle, with the, New England, but the colors just like to have these other, this kind of bronze color introduced and this kind of like rust red. We called it red, but it was really meant to be called rust red. Those were kind of the color schemes that we pulled.
It's a deep red. It's beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Red.
Yeah, thank you. And then we went with a little deeper green than they had with the previous kind of high school Sonics logo. That I always call it that because it does look like high school colors because it looks
Yeah.
so simple. And that's kind of, we moved really quickly with the color scheme because the work was so good. We kind of had the ownership eating out of our hands. They were kind of like, okay, they were letting us guide the conversation about the colors. And so
It seems
we
like
were,
the fans responded well too.
yes, I think that the fans did respond well. I think there's always the long loyalists that just hate it, when they're
Like
just, I
San
get it.
Diego. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to get people to get
Yeah.
over it. And you just have to move on. So this was, like I said, no pun intended, a slam dunk. And then we were getting all the final paperwork done and getting everything finished. And then all of a sudden, and it happens more than you would think. There comes that last minute call, and it's like very accurately, like the owner, oh, Tom, like super nice guy. We walked around the hallways of the office. Uh-oh. If
Yeah,
I've heard
exactly.
that once, I've heard that 1,000 times. And it's like the traditionalists are missing the Space Needle from the other logo. And we're just so known for that icon that we think we need to put it in there. Well, I didn't think that was the right idea. So I said, you know what? I brought into creative services and I said, we have to put the Space Needle in there. I knew they would not like it. And I was positive. It's one of the few things I've ever been really assured about, like I didn't think that they would like it, and then I was like, okay, then we even like internally, we plopped it in there. We followed exactly kind of the depth of your drop shadow, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. We even tried to make the color like a little off. And then like, well, but in my conscience, I said, well, let's make sure it's good enough that if they decide to go with it, we won't hate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So we
right.
noodled it some more. We sent it out there and within 2 hours, I had an approval, like it was done. It was when it was. And at this point,
Yeah.
it's this big thing that's just stuck in the middle of this otherwise really quick moving piece. But when it was all said and done, I was so happy that we had gotten through it. And I knew everything else that would go around it would be great, but it did create some challenges for us because now we had this thing stick in the middle of it. Like, how are we going to put that on the front of the uniform, or how are we going to punch that out? Because now we've in a weird sort of way, we've added a white element into the design. And so now that's going to move us a little bit. And so how do we get around that? And so that was,
did they ever put it on the uniforms? Because this is the only one that I had or remembered. Did they put it on the jerseys?
yeah. I mean, we couldn't put it on there. I tried it on multiple layouts and it was too busy. The Space Needle was busy.
I mean, it'd been a patch of just the needle, which says Seattle, even by itself.
Right.
Right.
But it was like, I was just like, it's so much cleaner without it. Like,
it's like the Friar from San Diego, right?
And even the oval, punch the oval out because then otherwise the oval and the font and the uniforms were fighting each other. So it's just like, let's just go with this. And so you can even see in the logo sheet where it's got the whole word mark recommendation and road, word mark. We didn't color the oval. We could have colored the oval and the color on the road uniform too. But I'm like, no, let's let that really great font pop off of the jerseys. And I think that was the right decision when it was all said and done, because it just it was just cleaner, simpler. And then the only thing that we tricked on, it's all sublimated except for the basketball is that little basketball is metallic. So so that's kind of how we got through the color study. And, I think a lot of people, the hardcore fans wanted yellow and green. And then the fans who love the change, I think they're still, even today, I still think it's really one of the most popular colored schemes that we've had in sports. And it's still unique. So, so those, I mean, like, to me, like, what a thrill. And this was just kind of like, I want to know more about what you're doing today, Tom. Like, I know that I see Cozy Fonts is a type company that you are owner of or a designer for, or a little bit of everything.
Calgary, it's way back way back in the 70s, doing all these logos, you wind up doing so many jobs, like I was saying before, hundreds of variations over you do 10 jobs, you probably wind up doing 100 logos. And I got to the point where I was drawing everything. I wasn't using fonts and altering them. In the early days, way back, before I was confident enough to draw letter forms of my own, I would take like Cooper Black or, Avant-Garde or, those great fonts. And I would make a word, and then I would pull a swash off of a letter. And it was always uncomfortable, but it was my way of trying to make a custom logo from a font that I thought was beautiful. That was how I started, until I got to the point where I said, I'm just going to draw it. I got confident enough with all the experience of drawing and drawing and drawing. And then so many times in a word or a big logo, there are repeat so many letters. And then I would start to see similarities. Shit, I could do a whole font from this, a whole alphabet. We called them alphabets, remember back in the day? Yeah. So I built a font, and there's about 287 to 350 characters in every font that I do. So it's the uppercase, lowercase, all the dingbats, the numbers, all the abbreviations, all the accent marks, and then the European characters. So I designed my first font then, and I did like 4 variations, bold, italic, and so on. I have now, up to this point, 30 font families and about 133 individual fonts from those 30 families. And my fonts you guys probably know about my fonts and some of the others. They're the biggest. So Cozy Fonts is on my fonts. They're the distributors. And I also have Creative Market. And that's how the fonts sell.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the stories, experiences, and creative process behind such a remarkable, legendary design career. To explore more of Tom's extraordinary work over the years, visit tomnikosey.com. You can also discover his original typeface designs through Cozy Fonts Foundry, where he continues to carry his passion for custom lettering into a new generation of work. Tom's son, Spencer Nikosey, has followed his father's legacy and built a creative masterpiece of his own. He is the founder of Kill Spencer, a Los Angeles-based company known for its handcrafted luxury bags, travel accessories, and functional products. You can explore his work at killspencer.com. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sports Branding Podcast, the Design Legend series.
Please like, subscribe, and drop us a comment.
And don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Sports Branding Substack.
Thanks again for listening.
And we'll see you next time.